The church doors were still open when everything fell apart. White roses lined the aisle. Soft music floated through the room. Guests whispered behind folded programs while the bride stood at the front, her hands trembling inside delicate lace gloves. Emily Carter had imagined this moment her entire life. The dress, the flowers, the quiet excitement in the air, the promise of a future she believed in. But the groom never came. At first, people thought he was late. Then someone noticed the best man pacing, near the entrance with his phone, pressed to his ear. His face looked pale, the way people look when they're about to deliver. Bad news, but wish they didn't have to. 5 minutes turned into 10. 10 turned into 30. The whispers grew louder. Emily felt every second stretch across, her chest like a weight she couldn't breathe under. Finally, the church doors opened again. But it wasn't the groom. It was Daniel Harper, the groom's older brother. Daniel walked slowly down the aisle, his shoulders tense, his expression tight with something that looked dangerously close to shame. He stopped a few feet from Emily. Her eyes searched his face, desperate for an explanation. "Where's Ryan?" she asked, her voice barely louder than a breath. Daniel swallowed. "He left." The words landed like a stone dropped into silence. Emily blinked. "Left?" she repeated. Daniel nodded slowly. "He packed his car this morning. Drove out of town." For a moment, the entire church seemed to stop breathing. Then the whispers exploded. "Oh my God! He ran out on her? On the wedding day?" Emily stared at Daniel like she hadn't understood the language he was speaking. "He wouldn't do that," she said quietly. "Ryan wouldn't just disappear." Daniel's jaw tightened. He did. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. The sound of the flowers hitting the aisle echoed through the stunned room. Emily didn't cry right away. That was the strange part. She just stood there, staring at the empty church doors where her future had been supposed to walk through. Across the room, Daniel's 6-year-old daughter Lily squeezed her grandmother's hand. "Daddy," she whispered. "Why is the bride sad?" Daniel looked at Emily again. Humiliation was written across her face in a way that made his chest ache. He had always known Ryan was reckless. Selfish sometimes, but abandoning a woman at the altar? Even Daniel hadn't believed his brother was capable of something that cruel. The pastor cleared his throat awkwardly. "We back and give everyone a moment," he said gently. Guests began shifting in their seats, unsure whether to leave or pretend nothing had happened. Emily finally moved. She bent down slowly, picked up the fallen bouquet, and held it against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly. She looked at him. "Why are you apologizing?" "Because he's my brother. That doesn't make it your fault." Daniel nodded, but the guilt still sat heavy in his stomach. Emily took a shaky breath. "I think everyone should go home," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. The guests began filing out, murmuring sympathetic words as they passed her. "I'm so sorry. You deserve better. Call me if you need anything." But sympathy couldn't erase the humiliation. Within 20 minutes, the beautiful ceremony had dissolved into empty chairs and fading music. Emily stood alone at the front of the church. Daniel lingered near the aisle, unsure if he should leave. His daughter Lily tugged his hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "the bride is going to cry." Emily finally did. The tears came suddenly and hard, breaking through the calm mask she had forced herself to wear. Daniel felt something twist painfully in his chest. He had seen heartbreak before. His wife had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving him alone with a little girl and a house that had never felt quiet until then. But watching someone get abandoned like this felt different, crueler. Emily wiped her face quickly when she noticed him still standing there. "You don't have to stay," she said. Daniel hesitated. "I know." She tried to smile. "It's not your responsibility to clean up your brother's mess." Lily suddenly slipped out of Daniel's hand and ran toward the bride. "Hey," Daniel called softly. But the little girl was already standing in front of Emily. "You look like a princess," Lily said seriously. Emily blinked through her tears. "Thank you. My mommy used to cry when she was sad, too," Lily continued. "But my daddy says crying is okay." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Lily—" But Emily knelt down slightly so she could look the little girl in the eyes. "You're very wise. Lily studied her face carefully. Did the man forget to marry you? Emily laughed weakly through her tears. Something like that. Lily thought for a moment. Then she turned around and looked at her father. Well, she announced confidently, Daddy could marry you instead. The church went silent again. Daniel's eyes widened. Lily, but the little girl crossed her arms like the solution was obvious. You always say we should help people. Emily let out a surprised laugh. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. It should have been ridiculous, and it was. But something about the moment felt strangely sincere. Emily stood slowly. Well, she said softly, that's probably the most unexpected proposal I've ever received. Daniel shook his head with an embarrassed smile. I promise my daughter usually has better timing. But Emily looked at him for a long moment. You stayed, she said. Of course. You didn't have to. Daniel shrugged. I know what it feels like to lose something important in front of everyone. Emily studied him. You lost your wife. Daniel nodded. 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Me too. For a moment, the church felt quiet in a different way. Not awkward, just honest. Emily looked down at the ring on her finger. Then slowly she slid it off. I guess this isn't mine anymore. Daniel watched her place it on a nearby table. What are you going to do now? He asked gently. She let out a long breath. I honestly have no idea. Then Lily tugged on her dress. You can come eat cake with us. Emily smiled down at her. There's still cake? Daniel chuckled. A lot of cake. Emily laughed for the first time all day. Well, it would be a shame to waste it. So the three of them walked into the empty reception hall together. The decorations still sparkled under soft lights. The giant wedding cake stood untouched in the center of the room. Emily stared at it. I spent 6 months planning this. Daniel grabbed 3 plates. Then we should probably enjoy at least part of it. They sat together at one of the tables. Lily happily ate frosting while Emily slowly began to relax. At some point, she looked at Daniel and said quietly, Your daughter might be onto something. Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. I'm sorry? Emily smiled softly. Not about actually marrying me today. Good, Daniel said quickly. But about helping people. Daniel leaned back in his chair. I think kindness usually matters more than perfect plans. Emily nodded. I used to believe life had to follow a certain script. And now? She looked around the room. Now I think maybe the best moments are the ones nobody planned. Daniel studied her for a moment. You're handling this better than most people would. Emily shrugged lightly. I already lost the worst thing that could happen today. Which is? She met his eyes. The wrong future. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. For the next hour, they talked. About Lily. About Emily's job as a teacher. About Daniel's construction company. What started as awkward conversation slowly turned into easy laughter. Finally, Emily stood up. I should probably go home and change before people start thinking this is my permanent outfit. Daniel smiled. Probably a good idea. Lily hugged Emily before leaving. Don't be sad anymore, she said. Emily hugged her back. I'll try. As Daniel walked them outside, Emily paused near the church steps. Daniel? Yeah? She hesitated. Thank you for staying. He shrugged. You deserve someone in the room who cared. Emily smiled. Well, if you ever need someone to help you finish that leftover cake. Daniel laughed. I might take you up on that. 6 months later, Emily stood in a park watching Lily chase pigeons across the grass. Daniel walked up beside her holding 2 cups of coffee. Hard to believe we met at a disaster wedding, he said. Emily smiled. Technically, it was my disaster wedding. Daniel handed her the coffee. Well, it led to something better. Emily looked at Lily, laughing in the distance. You know, she said thoughtfully, your daughter was right. Daniel raised an eyebrow. About what? Emily slipped her hand into his. Sometimes the person who stays is the one who truly belongs. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. And for the first time in a long time,